Hi, everybody, and welcome to tonight's special show. Like we said when we was live a couple of hours ago, we're gonna do a special show tonight where we're introducing Mr. Andrew DeAngelo to the Swedish people. So, welcome to Cannabis in Focus.
Good evening, everybody. It's my pleasure to be with you all. I can't wait to come to Stockholm and the conference and meet and see all your faces and dive deep into medical cannabis.
Yeah. But because you have been working with cannabis, basically all your life. I know very well who you are, but for those Swedes that been living under a rock, who are you?
Well, my name is Andrew DeAngelo, and I have an older brother, Steve DeAngelo, who's about 9 years older than me, and he started to get into cannabis at a very young age. Because when my brother was a teenager, the Vietnam War was still happening, and people in our country, in the United States, were being drafted. Young people were being drafted into that war, and my brother didn't want to go fight that war, so he left home at a young age and joined the resistance against the Vietnam War. And the way he made a living was trading in cannabis. And this was early 70s, 1970, 71, 72. So cannabis was completely prohibited in the United States and everywhere in the world at that point. And there was a war, in fact, being waged against anyone that was in the cannabis trade. So one of my earliest memories was my brother got arrested when he was 18 or 19, and he had to go to jail. And I was nine years old. And I had to visit him in jail, and with my mom and my dad. And it was interesting because my mom and dad were divorced at the time, but the jail would only let you come as a family, and you had to be 10 years old. So one of the things we had to do together as a family, my divorced parents and I, is lie about my age. And I had to lie and say I was 10 years old. And my parents had taught me up to that point never to lie to anybody, especially the police. But in fact, we did. And at the time, when you're a kid and you go through that, and there's a lot of impact on the family. So all the kids at school knew my brother was in jail, and I was teased, and all the neighbors knew, and my family was very embarrassed. My parents were embarrassed. And my brother was defiant, even though that he was in jail. It just made him angrier and more determined to work with the plant as not just an entrepreneur, but an activist. So when I got older and it was time for me to grow up and figure out what I'm going to do with my life, my brother introduced me to cannabis. At the time, I was hurt. I was physically hurt because I had been an athlete. And my dream was to be a professional athlete in high school, like a lot of young boys growing up in the world. But I got hurt, and I had a back injury, and it was very, very painful. And my brother handed me a joint one day and said, "You need this right now in your life. It's going to help you feel better." And we didn't know anything about medical cannabis. We didn't know anything. He just knew that it would make me feel better. And he was right. I decided to take some, and I immediately fell in love with the plant and fell in love with cannabis, and decided that I was going to follow in my brother's footsteps, my big brother's footsteps, and started trading in cannabis in high school. And as we got older and more successful doing that, we made money, and we never liked being criminals, and we never liked breaking the law. We never liked being outside of the mainstream of society. Those were all very uncomfortable things for us. Our parents were mainstream people. My father worked for the government, so it was very uncomfortable. So we became activists, and in America, the saying is, if you don't like the law, change it. And so we set about to change laws, and the first place we were able to do that was in California, which is now where I live. But I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area. As I mentioned, my dad worked for the government, so that's where we grew up. and of course we couldn't legalize there first, right under the nose of the federal government, but we did get to do that. But in 1996, we managed, after doing a lot of stuff in San Francisco, and we were responding to the AIDS crisis. So the way we got legalization done for medical in California in 1996 was, we didn't make the argument, personal freedom, everybody has a right to this.
Okay.
That was not our argument. Our argument was, people are dying of HIV/AIDS. They're sick. The government's not helping them. The government's not even recognizing they exist. And this plant is helping extend life. It's helping stimulate appetite.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And it's helping them. So our argument was medical. There's a medical need for this in our communities. And that argument went over with the public a lot better than the previous arguments we've been making up to that point, which was more about personal freedom. And that, alcohol's legal, cannabis should be legal, it's not as harmful, et cetera, et cetera. But once we started putting sick people in front of the cameras, and the public got to see that cannabis was helping them, you could see it. You can see it. All right. With the child with epilepsy, if you watch my Weed Wars, my reality program on I'll get to that in a second. But you give a child with epilepsy cannabis, CBD mostly, and you can see their seizures go down. You can see people becoming healthier and more well right there on camera. So in 1996, we got California done. 2 years later, my brother and I got it done in Washington, D.C., our hometown. The federal government controls Washington, D.C., so they did not allow us to implement the law. And that really broke our hearts. Yeah. Broke our hearts. And so then eventually, after some more run-ins with law enforcement, shortly after we passed the law, we decided to move to California and once and for all. And shortly after we moved there, a couple of years after we moved there, the city of Oakland, where I live now, decided to license medical cannabis dispensaries for the first time. You could get a license to open a medical cannabis dispensary. Up until then, there were unlicensed dispensaries, but there weren't any licensed legal dispensaries. My brother and I applied for one of the license, and we got one of the license. We opened a shop called Harborside in 2006 in Oakland, and it was really a wellness center. It wasn't just a shop that sold cannabis, medical cannabis. It was a wellness center. We had healing classes that people could take for free. We had support groups for seniors and veterans, people who returned from war that were traumatized. We had gatherings that were free for people. We had free medicine program. If you were poor, you could get free cannabis medicine at Harborside. If you wanted to write a letter to a cannabis prisoner, we'd also give you, or a politician asking to liberalize cannabis law somewhere else, then we'd give you free cannabis, medical cannabis in exchange for that. And all these programs we had were community based, and we operated as a nonprofit organization. We could not become a nonprofit because that requires the federal government. And we did not, and still do not, have legalization at the federal level in the United States. So those were sort of the glory days of medical cannabis out here in California. And then we legalized for adult use for all adults in California in 2018. Unfortunately, that framework, the legal framework for that, included a lot of regulation and taxes, and it gave local communities the ability to ban retail shops, and a lot of them did. So the legal industry in California today, which Harborside, my previous company, is still a big part of, we took that company public shortly after adult use legalization in Canada. You have to take companies public in Canada, because we part of what Harborside did was we defended ourselves against attacks from the federal government. Mm-hmm. So going public helped us raise money for that.
Yeah. No, but you need money to do pretty much anything, especially as an activist. And to me, that is the difference between an activist and a lobbyist: money.
Right. Well, I mean, luckily we had this plant that we could trade in and use the profits from that to do our activism. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough in our own, and so there came a point when the adult use framework was very hard on Harborside. So we needed a lot of professional investors and bankers and a lot of expertise we didn't have. So we decided that's the direction we decided to go in. And I wish I could say it was a lucrative exit for us. We're still waiting for all that to happen. But since then, I've been able to start another nonprofit organization called the Last Prisoner Project, and we get cannabis prisoners out of prison. We have 40,000 people in prison in the United States for cannabis, and most of those folks are Black, brown, or poor whites, all poor usually people. They shouldn't be in prison. Most of them are in prison in places where cannabis is legal already.
Yeah.
Cannabis is legal in most of the states that has some form of legalization, medical for certain, and adult use. I think we have in, 8 or 9 states now, adult use. And so it's very powerful what the people are doing at the local and state level with respect to cannabis. But it's at the federal level where we're still blocked in the United States. So there's a lot of valuable lessons for places like Europe and Sweden and Scandinavia that I hope to talk about at the conference, because we really screwed up in California. We had a really wonderful medical program where small businesses, legacy folks that have been working with the plant for a long time, which you have in Europe and you have in Sweden, I promise you. And those folks should be part of the industry. They should be welcomed in, because if they're not, they're going to sell underground, and you don't want 2 markets. That's a disaster. You want to create one market. So we can, if you, with good public policy and good entrepreneurs that care about something more than just making money. And most people in the cannabis, well, I wouldn't say most, but a lot of us do care about something more than that. And so it presents the opportunity for us to have impacts that are really positive in our communities and eventually in the whole country.
Adult use is recreational use, correct?
Yes. I call it adult use. I know better, but yes, most people refer to it as recreational use. It basically means if you're old enough to buy a beer, you're old enough to buy cannabis.
Yeah. And no, our channel is not age limited. You answered pretty much all my questions, but I want to go back. I want to go back to one thing, because is there something you have regrets about? Because according to my world, you have been pretty much at the spear point of the legalization, both recreational and the medical, and I can't assume that everything has turned out the way you wanted.
Oh no, I have so many regrets. Otto, many regrets. I regret that we went public. I regret that we didn't keep Harborside private. I regret that we didn't keep it a nonprofit. I regret some of the decisions we made as a company. We ran that company for 13 years and we tried to grow and take what we had learned to other places, other states. And because my brother had a felony conviction, we got run out of a lot of those states. For a long time, they would legalize medical in a state, but if you'd been busted for weed, you weren't allowed to participate, which is crazy, a crazy restriction, which has now it's the opposite. Now in the United States, because we've worked really hard as activists, if you've been busted, is actually an advantage. It's an advantage. You get a license easier than folks that have not been busted. So we turned that one around. But when we were growing, we pick and choose the few states to go into. I regret, that we had done that. We should have just stayed where we were and concentrated on growing in California. And the way we had a real dilemma when we legalized for recreational or adult use in California, because in order for us to achieve that, it costs about $25 million to get that done at the ballot box. You have to get all the petitions signed, and then you have to have a marketing campaign once you're on the ballot, and there's going to be opposition. So the funders usually determine a lot of what the law becomes. When we legalized for medical, the funders for that came in very late, and they were unable to change the framework that the people had. But this time they came in early, and
okay.
And so there was a lot of influence and compromise that we had to make with those funders, and I regret a bunch of those.
Okay.
I regret that, but you have to compromise when things get more legal in Sweden. Compromises will have to be made.
Yeah.
There's and some communities won't want cannabis retail or dispensaries or pharmacies or however is decided to happen, and other communities may embrace it a lot, and you can maybe have a coffee shop someday in Sweden, similar to what you have in Amsterdam. So when that's why I say there's so much to learn from our experience that we had in California. So now we have to try to fix some of those things that we got wrong, and it's really hard to fix it. Once it's a law, politicians and elected officials are reluctant to change it. They took a lot of risk legalizing in the first place. It's hard for them to say, "Oh, sorry, we got it wrong. We're going to fix it now." And they just don't like to spend political capital on cannabis. So this is the problem. This is some of the obstacles we're facing here in California and other places in the United States at the federal level. We're really blocked at the federal level, right?
That's the exact same situation we have in Sweden. Basically, there's nobody. We have a Christian sobriety movement. They are against it. Other than that, it's not really anybody really cares. I mean, we don't want the children smoking, and no, neither do we. So we're cool on that.
Yeah, that's right. We don't either.
Yeah, exactly. No, I do not want to give your children cannabis, but according to statistic, if we keep doing what we're doing now, your child is going to smoke cannabis. So
yeah, I mean, your teenagers probably are exposed to it right now.
Yeah.
Have been for decades, and it's really one of the arguments that's harder for people to understand. That's why I really encourage activists in Sweden to tell the patient stories. The patients are the ones that are gonna get this done for you. Yeah. Children with epilepsy, people with MS, people surviving cancer and radiation therapy, and don't be afraid to tell stories of folks that maybe can't get it in the pharmacy and they have to use the sort of the I call it the traditional market. But and because when that's how you hit people in the heart. It's really important to hit people in the heart, not hit them in the head all the time, because it's too intellectual. It's because cancer doesn't care what your politics are.
Yeah, true.
You know, and neither does Alzheimer's, and neither does MS, and neither does all these other things. And so what the great thing about working with cannabis, because it's a hard road to travel, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
See all my gray hair. I'm
working on them.
You'll get there. Keep working with cannabis, you'll get there, or it'll all fall out.
I've got some gray beard hairs so far. I mean, they're coming in.
I'll take the gray instead of all of it falling out, but one of those two things usually happens because it's a hard road to travel. But one of the great things about working with cannabis is seeing people get better, and I've had people come up to me and thank me for saving their life just because my brother and I had the courage to take one of those first licenses and invite the press in and invite the world in and invite everybody into the shop. No one up to that point, everyone was afraid to do that because they didn't want to get busted by the feds.
Yeah.
We call that the federal government. The feds is the slang term.
Yeah, no, we have Hollywood in Sweden. That much we have.
Yeah, okay. And you know those busts are brutal. You've seen them. That's how they really do it. I mean, everyone was afraid of that, but we knew that if we put the patients front and center, that it would be really hard to find a jury to convict us, even if we did get busted. So, and it's really true. I mean, think about the testimony at the trial. This man saved my life, you know? So it's I think that's one of the great things about working with cannabis is you get to help people. Even in the so-called recreational market, the plant is helping people, even if their motivation for embracing the plant is to have fun, get high, if you will. That's still going into their body. It's still engaged in the endocannabinoid system. It's still creating homeostasis. And it's most likely, not in everybody, but in many people, creates a more reflective, gentle, cooperative human being.
Yeah, no, it does. It does. It really does. I mean, do you know what Cannabis is?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I was there just a few months ago, and I have never been to a festival, so to speak, for 3 days where I did not see one single police officer anywhere near the event, and there were zero violence. I don't think I've ever been to a festival or even a event with zero violence like that. It was insane.
It's really one of the remarkable things about the plant that even the most conservative people should feel good about in their communities, because at a festival where everybody's drinking, there usually is at least one fist fight.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. You know? I mean, most family gatherings can't handle the booze without getting at least one fist fight. Or maybe that's just my family. Yeah.
No, I'm sure that's true. You know, I mean, so that's why the family that takes cannabis together stays together.
Yeah, they're gonna be sitting in a ring singing stuff. Yeah, but what you brought up initially is something that really is worrying me. Because I've been a cannabis activist for 15 years in Sweden. So I've been, or I say 15 years, I don't really know exactly when I started, who the fuck knows. But most of my adult life I've been some kind of cannabis activist. And I've been approached by different companies and stuff like that who wants to sponsor and give money and buy brands and stuff like that. And I'm sure you heard of Medical Marijuana Inc. They own they brought me to Amsterdam and had a big show and stuff like that, and I was like, yeah, nope. For once, don't need to talk more about them than that, but I mean, I'm really, really scared of the evil big cannabis. I'm not saying that a big cannabis necessarily has to be evil, but in all other businesses, the big whatnot is evil.
Yeah, we all are. So, but we're not going to be able to eradicate big cannabis.
No, and that is exactly my point as well. I mean, we need big cannabis, because big cannabis needs money, and money is going to be needed. But we also need the medical and the political movements to stand up, especially when it comes to like patents. Imagine when big companies try to patent different strains and stuff like that. I mean,
yes. I mean, look, I'm trying to build bridges. Between all these stakeholders you mentioned, and we're different. We have different values. I mean, some of the investors that came in, excuse me, with Harborside, they're transactional people. The only thing they care about is the deal, the transaction, the money, the numbers. And that's just who they are. They're capitalists to the core. They've been born and bred of the finest pedigree, the best schools, and so that's, so I think you got to try to build bridges, because there's also a lot of folks that have that pedigree that also want to have impact. I'm meeting a lot more impact investors that are coming into cannabis now. They generally don't come in the first wave. We're still at the end of the first wave when it comes to investing in cannabis. Marijuana Inc. is only, I don't know, 5, 7 years old, 8 years old, 10 years old. They're not that old. They were one of the first. They were like one of the.
They claim to be the first on the
American. Yeah, well, they were the first penny stock. Yeah. First penny stock. I think they still are penny stock. But let's just say I think you made the right decision.
I'm very comfortable with that guy.
But I'm still interested in building bridges, even with some kind of bridges. As long as because if we want to get the cannabis revolution in every corner of the globe, every medicine cabinet on earth, accessed by everybody, no matter how much money you have, no matter where you live, no matter who your neighbors are, then we need corporations. We need people who know how to make that kind of scale and distribution happen. So, and we need to also talk about sustainability. Our industry in the United States is dirty, very dirty, because most of the politicians and public policy, they want you to grow indoors, which is a disaster for the environment.
Yeah. But there's, but I mean, I'm still gonna be worried in Sweden, because Sweden is really, really set up for one actor to, take over the entire market, and I would believe, and
well, then you're going to have an underground market.
Yeah,
you're going to have an underground market.
Yeah, and that's insanely dangerous, because I believe that's one of the biggest problems I saw in Canada when they started. The prices were too high. I mean, the illegal cannabis was so much cheaper. You would be stupid if you didn't buy that.
Well, it's the same way in California today, and it's funny that you said you'd be stupid. Yeah. It's kind of like that,
Yeah, and in Sweden currently we have an insane gang problem, and that's because they have been able to make sick money out of, for example, cannabis and other drugs, completely unhindered, because frankly, sorry, Swedish police, you suck. And
Right.
this has led to them buying weapons and shooting each other and stuff like that. I mean, some people are starting to compare like Sweden to Chicago and stuff like that.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. It's pretty bad on some parts. And the thing is that all of this is funded by cannabis. Everybody knows it. Everybody's saying it. I mean, more than half
What
of
a
their
bummer.
incomes. Yeah, and I keep saying that let's take the market from them. And they just know, let's kill the market.
Well, you can't.
Exactly.
You can't kill the market. Look, we've tried. Ronald Reagan, all the people that came after him, Joe Biden, even they tried to lock everybody up, and it just you can't build the prisons fast enough. And it's a complete the harms that's caused by prohibition is much greater. Look at it, you wouldn't have the gangs doing this with cannabis. They'd be forced to do it with something else. If you legalize in the right way, the gangs are forced. They're either going to try to infiltrate the legal somehow, but most likely they'll just move on to other things, okay, that they trade in. That's not cannabis. The reason they're trading in cannabis is people want cannabis. Okay, and people want cannabis. So, this is why legalization is so important, because it will take that away from if you do it in a smart way. You do the public policy smart. And a lot of people, the big companies that maybe want to take the whole market from you, they'll try to lobby the politicians and say it's safer to just give it to one or two or three players, because then the gangs won't blah 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 blah. But that's a wrong argument, because you'll have this underground market and everything will be cheaper, because monopolies are generally the prices are a lot higher in monopolies. So this is the dilemma. The dual market dilemma is what the public policy people need a lot of help with, and maybe this conference that we're doing will help with that.
Yeah, it's gonna be it's gonna be a glorious conference. The conference is gonna be Stockholm Medical Cannabis Conference, like we have talked about a couple of hundred times by now. And Andrew, you are our main speaker. Not to take all the buzz out of it, the speech, but what will you be speaking about? Have you got any ideas yet?
Oh yeah, I'll be talking a little bit about how we got to this terrible place of prohibition. I'll be sharing a lot of my life story, probably more detail than I did with you today, and my brother, of course. We might even phone my brother in for an interview. I don't know yet.
Wow.
I don't know. We're kind of working on that. And I'll be doing a lot of Q&A sessions throughout the day. So, just like this interview, it's all about hearing what's happening in the United States and learning from what we've done right and what we've done wrong. I can tell you what we've done right. Legalization has not led to chaos in our communities.
No.
Both medical and adult use. There are, across this country, in the states where it's legal, there are thousands, tens of thousands of retail shops selling medical or adult recreational cannabis in the neighborhood, and the sky has not fallen on anybody's head. Teenage use of cannabis is not up. It's flat. We're seeing a crime is down in the neighborhoods that dispensaries are in generally, although now we have a gang problem. Gangs are starting to rob dispensaries. We can't bank. We have a problem with banking because it's federally illegal. So we can't put our money in the bank. So there's a lot of money in dispensaries and the gangs are robbing them. And
yeah, I know that circle. It's such a stupid, I mean,
so hopefully we'll get some banking access soon, somehow. But
yeah, Schumer is working on it, I've heard, for 2 years or something.
Right, yeah, they're always working on it, but I we'll see if they deliver. And in the meantime, everyone's going to be at risk. I mean, people are starting to get shot now, and it's terrible. Even the robbers are getting shot. So it's you know, it's an issue.
Yeah, as a dispensary owner, that's what I would have done. I would have gotten a gun as well, and that's
what happens. I mean, you know, I wish I could say it stopped everybody from trying to rob, but you know, this all happened. Most of this happened in one state in the United States, and it wasn't California, but a lot of shops have been robbed in California, and actually, one gentleman was shot in the foot a few weeks ago.
Ooh.
So it's you know, it's kind of like a bank. You have to protect it. You need the police. You need the community. This is another reason you need legalization, right? You wouldn't keep a bank, you know, vulnerable. So, and what happens is, because there's still a lot of police in the United States that are not happy with legalization, we have a hard time getting responses to help us when we're in distress, even though we pay the highest tax of anybody. So we're still having to, like I said earlier, build bridges and create cultural alignment with much different people. Hopefully, you know, now police budgets and law enforcement budgets get funded by these taxes. And so, you know, everybody's got more of a stake in it, and hopefully will come to their senses and realize that, you know, we can't overtax this. We can't overregulate this. We have to be mindful. There's an underground market. It's well established. And, you know, if we want to create one market, we're going to have to be able to compete with it. So and otherwise the whole thing's corrupt. Really. I mean, the whole thing's corrupt if you don't move towards that goal.
Yeah. But the thing is that, especially the recreational part, which is, I believe, in Sweden, the bigger piece at the moment. I mean, medical cannabis is a lot more expensive to produce, but recreational cannabis, I mean, it's like parsley, basically, if you do it in a large enough scale. I mean,
well, the only reason the medical cannabis is expensive is because they're doing it at Bedrocon and Holland, and they're, you know,
they have the regulations. You have to be able to
massive
contingency and stuff like that.
And you know, a good bit of money being made by a lot of people. You know.
Yeah. But that's medicine, at least in Europe. I know that's what they want. But the recreational part, I mean, you need a growing house. That's what you need, and then some skills. So, I mean, we could compete with the illegal market in no time.
Yeah,
because I mean, we can be producing this at cents a gram.
Well, if the framework's right, you know, and if the framework's right, I think it's very possible to do this. So, you know, usually the medical use of cannabis has to happen for a few years in a place. My understanding is there's only about 3,000 patients in the entire country of Sweden. Is that right?
I don't have the exact number, but I think it's something like that. It's not very many, but that's the official patients. I can just myself, I know about 50, 100 people that needs it for medicine illegally. And it gets it the traditional way, as we spoke. So we have more patients, and we have a lot more people who wants to use, but they are forced to the traditional markets, and that is where the gangs
traditional
rule.
market is how. Let me just ask you: do you just call somebody up and they come over and deliver you cannabis, or is it
No, it's even more widespread than that. It comes up on commercial and social media in Sweden. Kids are getting the TikToks accounts and stuff like that. Like,
I see.
send us a message and we'll bring everything you need: cocaine, weed, all about it. Because that is the big problem. Whenever they come and sell weed, they got the amphetamine, they got the cocaine, opiates.
See,
Stuff
we're not
like
going
that.
to have that in the legal shops. That's
Exactly.
You're not going to have it in the legal shop. What you will have is probably lab test. You should have a lab test for what's in the legal shop.
Yeah.
But really, once you have the lab test, you don't need that much more regulation. The lab will catch anything that is not happening upstream from the lab test. The lab will catch it. You won't put it in the market, and that's it. And the producer's going to have to learn to grow clean weed. So that's what I recommend, especially the first few years, because you want to absorb the traditional and underground market as much as you can, And if the gangs are still banging after that, then you'll have to maybe enforce a little bit, but you don't want to enforce against the wrong people, right? You don't want to lock patients up. You don't want to enforce, and so it's very complicated from a public policy level, because things have gotten so bad. Now unwinding it all is going to be a challenge, but it's better to err on the side of access and lower regulation and taxes than higher. I would say in the beginning, especially.
100%. Our time with you is up, unfortunately. If we want to see more of Andrew, I recommend you to come to Stockholm on the 27th of May to Stockholm Medical Cannabis Conference. You can see more information on www.smcc2022.se. But I have one last question for you, since you're from Cali and all that. I don't know if it was like 6 months ago or something like that. I heard about somebody who had made THC snortable.
Oh my goodness! Yes.
Was that true?
Yes, they really did.
Holy
that.
Shit!
Yeah.
I thought it was a joke.
Well, it was mostly a publicity stunt.
Yeah, I figured, but I was like, wow.
Yeah, it was mostly a publicity stunt, but I do think that it actually was in the market for a minute, and then by the second minute it wasn't.
Yeah.
But people will. That was down in Los Angeles, and there's like you said, with social media and the way media works now, people will do things like that because it gets a lot of attention. Yeah. And so that same company sells other things. They sell gummies, they sell other things, and so a gummy is like a soft candy that's very popular in the medical and the adult.
Yeah. We get the regular yearly warnings from the sobriety movement of all the children that gets the wrong gummies and dies, because that happened.
Well, first of all, no one's ever died from
Exactly.
ingesting cannabis, even children. But I'd be more worried about the sugar. But in any case, it's not good. Obviously kids are not going to have access to it. Here in the United States, they're put in childproof packaging. So,
okay. That's cool.
And there's warning labels.
Yeah. And I'm going to blame the parents in those cases.
You have to keep these things, any medication, any medication you keep in a locked place.
Who keeps like the whiskey bottles next in the children's room? I mean, nobody does that. But yeah, I'm not going to keep you here since I know you have a tight schedule. We will see each other when you get to Sweden. It's going to be real awesome meeting in person. And we will see all of you, other people, on the 27th of May. So thanks for tonight, everybody. And we'll see you next Tuesday at 1700, just like usual.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.